Welcome back to True God Code. If you watched part 1 of this series, thank you. The response to that video has been extraordinary. People who spent years dismissing the idea that powerful institutions could coordinate secret agendas came away with something they did not expect. Documented proof that they already did. MKULTRA, COINTELPRO, Operation Mockingbird. These are not theories. They are declassified historical facts confirmed by congressional hearings, court records, and government archives. If this is the first True God Code video you have found, welcome. You do not have to have seen part 1 to follow what we are doing today, but we recommend going back and watching it first. It establishes the foundation everything in part 2 builds on. The link is in the description. Before we begin, if this channel has given you something worth thinking about, please subscribe right now, hit the notification bell, and share this video. Not because we want the numbers, but because the people who most need to see this information are the ones who have never gone looking for it. One share from you changes that for someone in your life. Here is what we are doing in part 2. Part 1 answered the question, did they actually do this? The answer was yes, documented, sourced, confirmed. Part 2 answers the next question, and it is a stranger one. Did they tell us they were going to? Because according to a significant and growing body of evidence, and they did, not in press releases, not in government hearings, in entertainment, in architecture, in ceremony, in symbols that sit in front of hundreds of millions of people every year, without most of those people knowing what they are looking at. This is called the Disclosure Doctrine. And by the end of this video, you will never watch a halftime show, an Olympic ceremony, or the nightly news the same way again. We present only what is documented first. We label speculation as speculation. And at the end, we take a turn that will change how you think about all of it. Let us begin. They have to tell you. The doctrine explained. Before we look at a single example, we need to establish why the pattern is claimed to exist. Because the most important question is not whether the disclosure is happening, it is why. There are 3 documented explanations offered by researchers studying this pattern. They are not mutually exclusive. The most credible reading is that all 3 operate simultaneously. The first explanation is spiritual. To understand it, you need to know what Hermeticism is. Hermeticism is an ancient mystical and philosophical tradition originating in Egypt and Greece, named after the legendary figure Hermes Trismegistus, meaning thrice great Hermes. He was believed to be a keeper of cosmic, secret knowledge that predated both Moses and the Greek philosophers. Hermetic teaching holds that the universe operates according to spiritual laws that bind even those who understand and use those laws. Think of it as the idea that the cosmos has rules that nobody, not even the powerful, can break without consequence. One of those rules in Hermetic teaching is this: before an action is taken against an intelligent being, that being must first be warned in some form, not clearly, not honestly, but in some technically visible way. The famous Hermetic principle known as above, so below, found in the ancient document called the Emerald Tablet, means that what is true in the spiritual realm is reflected in the physical world. The spiritual rules govern the physical actions. Those who believe they operate within this system believe they are bound by its rules. Disclosing what is coming, even in a form most people cannot read, removes their spiritual liability. You were told, you did not act, the consequences are yours. The second explanation is psychological. A researcher named Michael Hoffman, who has studied elite power structures and occult traditions for decades, calls the pattern the revelation of the method. His documented argument is this: the ruling power structure deliberately reveals its plans to the public in plain sight, not as a warning to help people resist, but as a demonstration of power and as a tool of psychological control. He describes the effect as the alchemical processing of the mass mind. Let us explain what that means. Alchemy, historically, was the attempted transformation of base metals into gold, but the term is used by Hoffman metaphorically to describe the deliberate transformation of how a population thinks and behaves. Alchemists believed they could change the fundamental nature of a substance through a specific process. Hoffman argues that the elite use public disclosure the same way, to gradually change the fundamental nature of public consciousness, to make the unthinkable thinkable, to make the monstrous normal, to make the hidden visible without making it resistible. The disclosure does not produce resistance. It produces something far more useful to those in power: paralysis and ridicule of anyone who points it out. You see it, you say nothing, you do nothing, and by doing nothing you are changed. The third explanation is legal. If you are warned of a plan in advance and you do not act to prevent it, moral and legal responsibility shifts from those implementing the plan to those who were warned and failed to respond. The disclosure is designed to be technically visible, but practically invisible, like the fine print in a contract that you never read but technically signed. You agreed to terms you never understood. The perpetrators are absolved because they told you. The disclosure is the fine print. The effect is the contract. These three explanations, spiritual requirement, psychological submission, and legal consent transfer, form the framework within which every example in this video operates. Keep them in mind as you watch what follows. And before we go into the evidence, one preview of where Part 3 takes us, because if the Disclosure Doctrine is real, if there genuinely is a system in which the agenda must be revealed before it is implemented, then it has an origin that predates every occult text, every hermetic document, every encoded magazine cover, and every Olympic ceremony by 3,000 years. Isaiah chapter 46 verse 10. God speaking. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from ancient times things not yet done, saying, "My counsel shall stand, and I will accomplish all my purpose." The original Disclosure Doctrine is divine prophecy. God declared the end from the beginning, before the empires rose, before the networks were built, before the technologies were invented. The enemy did not invent disclosure. He counterfeited it. In Part 3, we show you exactly how. But first, the evidence for the pattern itself. When they say it plainly, the literal cases. We begin not with symbols or halftime shows. We begin with cases where the disclosure was not hidden at all, where the words were written plainly in public documents under real names and distributed to the general public, and where nobody connected the disclosure to its effect until after the effect had already arrived. In 1973, a man named Donald Barr published a science fiction novel. The title was Space Relations. The plot: a distant planet ruled by a class of oligarchs who operate a systematic child sex slavery network. Children are kidnapped, transported across space, and trained to serve the elite. The novel was published under Donald Barr's own name, not a pseudonym. He did not feel the need to disguise his authorship. Donald Barr was at the time the headmaster of the Dalton School, one of the most exclusive private schools in Manhattan, educating the children of Wall Street executives, media figures, and political leaders. He was also a former OSS officer, the wartime intelligence organization that became the CIA. The following year, 1974, Donald Barr hired a 21-year-old college dropout named Jeffrey Epstein to teach mathematics and physics at the Dalton School. No degree, no teaching credentials, no qualifiable reason for the appointment has ever been provided. Epstein tutored the children of Bear Stearns CEO Alan Greenberg, who subsequently offered Epstein his first Wall Street position. That introduction was the foundation of everything that followed: the private island, the network of compromised powerful men, the trafficking operation that Ghislaine Maxwell is currently serving 20 years in federal prison for facilitating. The man who wrote a novel about oligarchs running a child sex slavery network inserted the man who would build the most significant elite child trafficking network in modern American history into the highest levels of society the year after he published the novel. This is not symbolic. It is a novel published under the author's real name, describing in narrative form what the documented record later confirmed was already in motion around him. The disclosure was literal, Nobody connected it until decades later. Donald Barr was the father of William Barr, who served as Attorney General of the United States twice, who oversaw the federal custody in which Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, whose Department of Justice declared that death a suicide and closed the investigation. The father inserted Epstein, the son oversaw his death. Both were connected to US intelligence. The Disclosure was a published novel. Second, in 2016, the World Economic Forum, the organization that convenes the world's most powerful business and government leaders at its annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, published a promotional video. In that video, the following statement appeared on screen: "You will own nothing and be happy." This was produced and distributed publicly by the WEF under their own branding. It was not satire. It was a statement of aspiration for the society they intended to help build. Klaus Schwab, the WEF's founder, stated publicly in a 2017 interview, "We have penetrated the cabinets." He was describing his Young Global Leaders program, a training and networking initiative whose alumni include Emmanuel Macron, Justin Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern, Angela Merkel, Tony Blair, and Mark Zuckerberg. The leaders of multiple major Western governments were trained and networked through a private program run by an unelected Swiss businessman who publicly described having penetrated their cabinets. He said it proudly, on film, in a documented interview. In July 2020, 4 months into the COVID pandemic, Schwab published a book titled COVID-19, The Great Reset. 280 pages outlining the systemic changes to the global economy and governance that the pandemic should be used to implement. The speed of its publication led many researchers to question whether the book was already written before COVID arrived. What is documented? The book exists, it outlines the agenda, and the agenda has been implemented across the Western world in the years since. The Disclosure was a published book under the author's own name. Third, on October 18, 2019, 6 weeks before the first documented COVID case in Wuhan, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, the World Economic Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation jointly hosted a tabletop simulation of a global coronavirus pandemic called Event 201. The simulation modeled a novel coronavirus, economic collapse, social media censorship, and coordinated international government response. The documentation is public, the participants are named, the organizations that ran the simulation are the same organizations that shaped the global response that followed. They simulated the pandemic 6 weeks before it began, with the same organizations that would govern the response. And they published the simulation publicly, you were told. The documentation was available to anyone with a search engine. When fiction announces reality. Now we move to cases where the disclosure came not in books or public statements, but in entertainment, in stories broadcast to millions of people who were never told they were watching a preview. We begin with the hardest case to dismiss. On March 4, 2001, Fox Television broadcast the pilot episode of The Lone Gunman, a spin-off of The X-Files. The central plot, a shadowy faction within the United States government hijacks a commercial passenger aircraft using a remote control override installed in the plane's autopilot. The target is the World Trade Center in New York City. The plan is designed to be blamed on a foreign government to manufacture public support for war. The episode aired March 4, 2001, 6 months and 7 days before September 11th. It was broadcast on a major American television network to millions of viewers. The World Trade Center was its specific named target. The mechanism was a remotely controlled aircraft. The purpose was a false flag to justify war. Creator Chris Carter told journalists the World Trade Center simply seemed like a logical target given the 1993 bombing. Whether that explanation is adequate, you will have to decide. Now, The Simpsons. In the year 2000, an episode titled Bart to the Future depicted Donald Trump as a former president who had left the country in economic ruin. 15 years before Trump descended the Trump Tower escalator to announce his presidential campaign. The show has also depicted with documented timestamps, smartwatch communication technology years before smartphones existed, autocorrect failure before the technology existed, and specific sporting outcomes predicted years in advance. The pattern is documented, the timestamps are not disputed. Now a case that closes the gap between fiction and documented insider knowledge entirely. In 2023, Netflix released a film called Leave the World Behind. The premise: a cyber attack causes societal collapse. Power grids fail, communications go dark, society fractures within days. The film was produced by Barack and Michelle Obama's production company, Higher Ground Productions. The director, Sam Esmail, gave an interview to Vanity Fair. He disclosed that President Obama reviewed the script and gave him notes. Then he described what those notes revealed. Quoting his documented statement directly, "I am writing what I think is fiction. I am trying to keep it as true to life as possible, but I am exaggerating and dramatizing." And to hear an ex-president say, "You are off by a few details," I thought I was off by a lot. The fact that he said that scared the hell out of me. The former president of the United States, who held classified threat assessment briefings for 8 years, reviewed a fictional script depicting a cyber attack collapse of American society. And he told the director that the scenario was essentially accurate, off by only a few details. The film was then produced by his own company and released to the world. This is not pattern matching. This is not coincidence in a magazine cover. This is a sitting former president with direct access to classified national security assessments, confirming on the record that a fictional collapse scenario was close to the real plan, and he helped produce the film. Stanley Kubrick completed his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, in 1999 after 18 months of continuous shooting. The film depicts an elite private ritual gathering conducted in a country mansion, masked participants, ritualized ceremony, and the systematic destruction of anyone who stumbles upon what they were not meant to see. Kubrick died 4 months before the film was released. He had told colleagues it was the most important film he ever made. The film was edited after his death by the studio, without his input or approval. What the Bohemian Grove ritual footage confirmed, what the Epstein network established through federal prosecution, and what multiple documented elite gathering records have since verified, is that the general category of private ritualized gathering among the powerful that Kubrick depicted is not purely fictional. The specific gathering in the film is fiction. The general category is documented fact. Whether Kubrick knew something specific and was communicating it through fiction, or whether he arrived at a realistic depiction through research, is a question the evidence invites, but does not definitively settle. The timing of his death and the posthumous alteration of his final work without his approval are documented facts. When they write it in stone, some disclosures are not broadcast through a screen. They are carved into granite, built into airport terminals, etched into the design of capital cities. They are disclosures you can visit. The Georgia Guidestones. In 1980, a monument was erected in a field in Elbert County, Georgia. 4 large granite slabs inscribed in 8 languages: English, Spanish, Swahili, Hindi, Hebrew, Arabic, traditional Chinese, and Russian. Whoever built it wanted the message to be legible to any literate human being, regardless of their native language. The first inscription read, "Maintain humanity under 500,000 in perpetual balance with nature." The current global population is 8 billion people. Reaching 500 million from 8 billion requires the elimination of approximately 93% of all human beings currently alive. The monument was commissioned by a group using the pseudonym R.C. Christian. The name is significant to those who study the history we are covering. Christian Rosenkreutz, often abbreviated as R.C., is the legendary founder of the Rosicrucians, a secret fraternal order founded in early 17th century Europe that claimed to possess secret esoteric wisdom passed down from ancient Egypt. The Rosicrucians are one of the documented historical root organizations that fed into the development of Freemasonry. The pseudonym was not random. It was a deliberate identification with a specific occult lineage. The guide stones also contained a shorter message inscribed at the top in 4 ancient languages: Babylonian cuneiform, Classical Greek, Sanskrit, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. These are the 4 languages of the ancient mystery traditions, the civilizations whose initiatory religious systems fed into the Hermetic tradition, into Freemasonry, and into the secret society network documented throughout this series. The monument did not just carry a message about population reduction. It declared the ideological lineage of those who built it in the 4 languages of the ancient world's most significant mystery traditions. The guide stones stood for 42 years. Someone destroyed them with explosives on July 6, 2022. Local authorities demolished what remained the same day. No arrest has been made. No credible explanation for who destroyed them has been officially confirmed. The disclosure was in granite, in a field, in 8 languages, for 42 years. The Denver International Airport. Denver International Airport opened in 1995. In its main terminal, on walls that millions of passengers walk past every year, hang murals commissioned from artist Leo Tanguma. The first mural depicts a massive soldier in a gas mask and military uniform towering over a devastated landscape. He carries a machine gun and a large sword. Beneath the sword lies a dead dove, the universal symbol of peace. Beneath the soldier lie the ruins of cities and the bodies of women and children. This is the image of what must be destroyed before the new order is built. In occult tradition, specifically in the Hegelian framework that runs through much of elite political philosophy, the old world must be broken down, its institutions burned, its symbols of peace and stability killed before the new world order can be constructed in its place. Problem. Reaction, solution. The soldier with the dead dove is the problem. The second mural shows children from every nation weeping and carrying the ruins of their civilizations. This is the reaction. The population suffering the breakdown. The third mural shows those same children bringing weapons to be forged into agricultural tools. The gas-masked soldier lies defeated. This is the solution, the new utopian order that rises from the destruction in Masonic and Theosophical tradition. Theosophy being the late 19th century mystical movement that directly influenced the founding philosophy of the United Nations and whose publishing company was originally called Lucifer Publishing Company. The ideal end state of humanity is a unified world of peace and plenty under a single enlightened governance system. The Denver murals depict in sequence the 3 stages of that process: destruction, suffering, utopia. These murals are on the walls of a public American airport. You can fly to Denver today and look at them. They have been there for 30 years. The airport also contains a 32-foot fiberglass horse with glowing red eyes positioned at the main entrance. The first thing every arriving passenger sees. It is officially titled Blue Mustang. Locals call it Blucifer. To understand why this matters, you need to understand what the horse represents in the symbolic vocabulary we have been covering throughout this video. In the Book of Revelation, 4 horsemen ride at the opening of the final judgments on white, red, black, and pale horses. But in the broader occult tradition and in certain indigenous prophetic traditions, the blue or dark horse represents a specific kind of power, otherworldly, unstoppable, and operating outside the boundaries of normal human life. The glowing red eyes are the specific visual marker of supernatural malevolence across virtually every culture that uses red-eyed imagery, from demonic iconography to the Hollywood visual vocabulary for supernatural threat. Red eyes in the dark are not a neutral artistic choice. They are the universal symbol of something watching from a place where it should not be. And then there is this: the horse killed its creator. Sculptor Luis Jimenez was working on the statue in his New Mexico studio in 2006 when a section of it broke free and fell on him, severing an artery in his leg. He died of his injuries before the horse was completed. His family finished the work, and the airport installed it anyway in 2008. A 32-foot blue horse with glowing red eyes that killed the man who made it stands at the entrance of a major American airport, the first thing you see when you arrive. It has been there since 2008, in plain sight, watched by millions of travelers every year who have never been told what it means or what it did to its maker. The Bohemian Grove. Every summer since 1878, a gathering has taken place in a redwood forest in Sonoma County, California. The Bohemian Club counts among its documented members sitting and former US presidents, Fortune 500 CEOs, media executives, and intelligence directors. The Manhattan Project, the US nuclear weapons program, was planned at the Grove in 1942. This is in the historical record. At the center of the gathering is a ritual called the cremation of care. A 40-foot stone owl sits at the edge of a lake. The owl, in ancient Hermetic and mystery religion tradition, represents occult wisdom, specifically hidden wisdom that only the initiated can access. The word occult simply means hidden. The owl sees in the dark what others cannot see. It has been used across cultures as the symbol of the knowledge that is invisible to ordinary people, but visible to those initiated into the mysteries. The owl of Athena, Greek goddess of wisdom, it is perhaps its most famous form. The same owl appears in miniature on the United States dollar bill, hidden in the upper right corner of the ornate border surrounding the number 1. Participants in robes gather before the 40-foot owl. An effigy is burned in a ceremony called the cremation of care. Care, in this ritual context, means the burden of conscience, the moral weight of ordinary human concern for others. It is symbolically burned away at the beginning of the gathering. The men who govern the world's largest economies and militaries ritually burn their conscience at the start of their annual private meeting. In 2000, journalist Alex Jones entered the Grove with a concealed camera and filmed the ceremony. The footage is documented and publicly available. This is not a theory. It is a gathering of the most powerful men in America conducting an annual ritual before a stone owl, filmed and documented. The disclosure is the ceremony itself, conducted openly enough that a journalist filmed it. Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, was designed by documented Freemasons for a Freemason president. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, a French-trained architect and documented Freemason, designed the city plan. George Washington, a documented 33rd-degree Freemason, laid the Capitol cornerstone in a Masonic ceremony on September 18, 1793, in full Masonic regalia. This is in the Congressional Historical Record. The Washington Monument is a 555-foot obelisk, the tallest obelisk in the world. An obelisk is a specific ancient Egyptian sacred monument. In Egyptian religion, the obelisk represented the primordial mound of creation, the first thing that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. It also represented the petrified ray of the sun god Ra, the shaft of divine solar energy touching the earth. Obelisks were placed at the entrances of Egyptian temples as sacred markers. There is an Egyptian obelisk in Rome outside the Vatican. There is one in Paris. There is one in London. And there is one, the largest in the world, at the center of the capital of the United States. The pattern of placing obelisks in the centers of power is not architectural coincidence. It is the consistent application of a symbolic tradition across every major Western power center simultaneously. The all-seeing eye above the unfinished pyramid on the American dollar bill was placed there in 1935 by Franklin D. Roosevelt, a documented 32nd-degree Freemason. The eye above the pyramid is the eye of providence. In Masonic tradition, it represents the all-seeing eye of the grand architect of the universe observing all things. The pyramid with the missing capstone represents the unfinished work of building the ideal civilization, with the eye floating above it representing the divine watchfulness that will eventually complete the work. The Latin beneath it reads, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages. This is the founding generation's public declaration, placed on their currency and handled by every American every day, that what they were building was explicitly a new order, not a continuation of the old world, a deliberate new order, when it's broadcast to 1 billion people. Now we come to disclosures that do not require you to visit a field in Georgia or an airport in Denver. These were broadcast directly to you, into your living room, on your television, at prime time, in front of the largest audiences assembled in the history of mass media, the Paris 2024 Olympic opening ceremony. On July 26, 2024, the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympic Games was broadcast to hundreds of millions of viewers globally. One sequence of the ceremony depicted performers arranged at a long banquet table. Catholic bishops across multiple countries, Christian leaders of multiple denominations, and commentators around the world immediately and independently described it as a deliberate recreation of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, the most recognized painting in the history of Western civilization, depicting Jesus and his disciples at their final meal before his crucifixion. Drag performers were prominently featured at the table. A figure interpreted as the Greek god Dionysus was at the center. To understand why this was significant, you need to understand what Dionysus represents in the mystery religion tradition. Dionysus is the Greek god of wine, ecstasy, liberation from social constraints, and the dissolution of individual identity into collective frenzy. In the ancient mystery religions, the secret initiatory cults of Rome and Greece that form one of the documented root systems of Freemasonry and Hermeticism, Dionysian ritual was specifically about the deliberate breaking down of social norms, moral restraint, and conventional identity. The Dionysian mysteries involved intoxication, ritual frenzy, and the crossing of what ordinary society considered sacred boundaries. To place a Dionysian figure at the center of a tableau, visually identical to the Last Supper, the most sacred image of Christianity's founder, is not a neutral artistic choice in the vocabulary of this tradition. It is the deliberate replacement of the Christian sacred at the center of the most watched ceremony in the world. Thomas Joly, the ceremony's artistic director, stated that the tableau depicted the ancient Greek feast of Dionysus and was not a reference to the Last Supper. He said the confusion was an honest misreading. Pope Francis issued a documented public statement saying he was pained by the offense caused to many Christians. He said one should never mock religious beliefs. The Pope personally responded to a single sequence of an Olympic opening ceremony. Whether the tableau was accidental resemblance, ancient mythology, or deliberate broadcast mockery of Christianity's most sacred image to a global audience, is a judgment you are equipped to make, having heard all three accounts. What is not contested, the imagery is documented. The Pope personally responded, and it was watched simultaneously by hundreds of millions of people. The Grammy Awards 2023. On February 5, 2023, Sam Smith performed at the Grammy Awards on CBS, broadcast to tens of millions of American households in prime time. Smith performed wearing a red devil costume with horns. The stage was designed as a hellscape, flames, darkness, destruction. Dancers in bondage-style costumes surrounded Smith throughout. Kim Petras emerged from a large cage at the center of a burning arrangement. To understand what was being broadcast, you need to understand what the devil costume signifies in the tradition this imagery draws from. In the Luciferian philosophical tradition, which is distinct from Satanism but related to it, Lucifer is not the Christian devil of torment and destruction. He is the light bringer, the one who gave humanity knowledge and freedom that the divine creator withheld, the figure who liberated human consciousness from the constraints of religious obedience. The horns and the red and the fire are not a horror costume. They are the symbols of the figure who gave humanity fire in the Promethean myth, who suffered for liberating human knowledge from divine control. Lucifer means light-bearer in Latin. In this tradition, the performance is not about evil, it is about the celebration of liberation from divine constraint. The snake in the garden who told Eve she would not die but would become like God. That figure is the hero of this tradition. This is the worldview that the Grammy performance broadcast to tens of millions of American households in prime time. The Recording Academy promoted it in advance on their official social media channels. No parental advisory was broadcast. We note the imagery. We note what it means in the tradition from which it draws, whether this represents artistic expression or the deliberate broadcast normalization of an anti-Christian theological position to a mass audience, is a judgment the evidence invites. The Super Bowl halftime shows. The Super Bowl reaches an annual audience larger than any other single entertainment event in the United States. Before we examine specific performances, you need to understand what the recurring symbols mean to those who use them, because without that context, the imagery looks like art direction. With the context, it looks like something deliberate. The black and white checkerboard pattern, alternating black and white squares, is the floor pattern of every Masonic lodge in the world, without exception. In Masonic teaching, it represents the duality at the heart of existence: light and darkness, good and evil, the initiated and the uninitiated. Every candidate for Masonic initiation stands on this floor during their ceremony. The checkerboard is not a decorative choice. It is the central symbolic ground of the most widespread secret society in human history. The Egyptian goddess Isis, depicted through spread wings, a thrown headdress, and the systematic assembly of scattered fragments, represents, in occult tradition, the supreme divine feminine force that works behind the visible world to restore the divine order. In the ancient mystery religions of Egypt and Rome, whose initiatory structures directly influenced Freemasonry, Isis is the mother of Horus, the divine child who defeats Set, the god of chaos, and restores righteous rule. In modern occult symbolism, she represents hidden wisdom and the power assembling the new order from the ruins of the old. The figure elevated above the crowd and standing above everyone and then descending represents, in initiatory tradition, the divine being who descends from a higher realm to bring secret knowledge to the world below. This enacts the core Hermetic principle: as above, so below. The elevated figure who descends is a visual enactment of the bringing of divine light from the hidden realm to the visible world. It is the Promethean myth made into performance. The color red in the symbolism of Revelation 17 and in the ancient Babylonian and Roman mystery religion traditions represents sovereign worldly power and the authority of the mystery religion system. The great harlot of Revelation 17 is clothed in red and purple. Red is the color of worldly power, blood covenant, and the dominant force of the world system. It is not a fashion choice in this vocabulary. Fire represents, in Hermetic and Luciferian tradition, the divine gift stolen from the gods, the Promethean fire of consciousness, knowledge, and liberation. To descend into fire at the end of a performance is to complete the Promethean narrative, the delivery of the stolen divine gift to the world below. The diamond triangle hand gesture, formed by touching the thumbs and index fingers to create a triangle shape, represents, in certain initiatory traditions, the capstone of the pyramid. The unfinished pyramid on the dollar bill has no capstone. The floating eye above it represents what will eventually complete the pyramid. The diamond gesture is the capstone, the point of illumination that closes the pyramid and completes the great work. Now the performances. Madonna in 2012 entered on a chariot drawn by performers in Roman centurion costumes, the military apparatus of the empire that absorbed the mystery religions of Egypt and Greece into its own governance system. Giant spread wings flanked her stage, the specific iconic imagery of Isis in Egyptian iconography, the divine mother whose wings represent protection and the assembling of the new order. Her performance concluded with her descending through the stage floor into fire, while the words "World Peace" appeared on screen. In occult tradition, the peace that follows controlled destruction is the promise of the new order, the world rebuilt after the old has been burned away. Isis descending into fire to deliver world peace. That is what the vocabulary describes. Beyoncé in 2013 included imagery associated with the Egyptian goddess Oshun, a water goddess in Yoruba and Afro-Caribbean mystery religion tradition that is syncretized with Isis and performed through a secondary persona she explicitly named Sasha Fierce. The deliberate adoption of an alternate identity that takes over during performance mirrors the initiatory concept of the transformed self that emerges after the death of the old identity, a core principle of Masonic degree initiation where the candidate symbolically dies as his old self and is raised as a new being. The diamond capstone hand gesture was used repeatedly throughout the performance. Katy Perry in 2015 entered on a mechanical lion. In ancient mystery religion, specifically in the cult of Cybele in Rome and in the Mithraic mystery religion that was the primary rival to early Christianity in the Roman Empire, the lion represents the conquering solar force and the power of divine kingship. Perry then performed on the Masonic checkerboard dualism pattern as the smallest figure among giant chess pieces. In Masonic initiatory tradition, the candidate begins as a rough stone, the smallest and least finished piece, and is worked on through the degrees until they are perfected. The candidate always starts as the least significant piece on the board. Lady Gaga in 2017 opened standing alone on the roof of NRG Stadium, elevated above the entire 70,000-person crowd. She descended to them on wires. The solitary elevated figure who descends to the mass gathered below is the visual enactment of the Hermetic transmission, the divine light-bearer bringing knowledge from above to the world below. As above, so below, enacted in front of 100 million television viewers. The surveillance-themed choreography beneath her as she descended, cameras, observation, monitoring, reflected the all-seeing architecture whose real-world infrastructure we have been documenting in the True God Code framework. Rihanna in 2023 performed in an all-red wardrobe while visibly pregnant, suspended on floating platforms above the field. In the symbolic vocabulary of Revelation 17 and the ancient mystery religion traditions, the figure clothed in red, elevated above the world while carrying the new thing about to be born, is the figure of worldly, sovereign power in the process of bringing forth the next age. The red-clothed, elevated, pregnant figure is the visual embodiment of the system that rules the world, giving birth to whatever comes next. What we are documenting here is not that these performers are conscious participants in a secret agenda. Some may be, some may not be. What we are documenting is that the symbolic vocabulary appearing consistently across multiple performers, multiple years, and multiple artistic directors, the checkerboard, the Egyptian goddess imagery, the elevated figure descending, the fire, the all-red, the diamond capstone, the lion, is not the accidental convergence of independent artistic choices. It is a shared symbolic language, and that language is the same language documented in every other category in this video, in the architecture, in the monuments, in the ceremonies, in the elite ritual gatherings filmed in California redwood forests. The language is consistent, the audience is enormous, and most of the audience does not know what language they are being spoken to in. Music and entertainment. The industry speaks. Some of the most compelling testimony about the disclosure system has not come from researchers analyzing symbols from the outside. It has come from participants describing what they experienced from the inside. In 2005, Dave Chappelle walked away from a $50 million Comedy Central contract and flew to South Africa. No one who has been offered $50 million and walked away from it has ever given a satisfying financial reason for doing so. In multiple documented public interviews spanning 20 years, Chappelle has described his reason consistently. He described a specific incident involving a costume requirement on the set of his show that he perceived had a spiritual dimension. he was not comfortable with. He said the entertainment industry requires something beyond a business relationship. There are people who have made a certain kind of submission and people who have not. He has maintained this account consistently for 2 decades across multiple interviews. In January 2024, comedian Cat Williams appeared on Shannon Sharp's Club Shay Shay podcast. The interview received over 40 million documented views. Williams made specific named documented claims about multiple entertainment figures. He described an organized system of suppression for talent that does not comply with certain industry requirements. Some claims were later echoed in reporting and in legal proceedings that followed. The interview is documented. The subsequent events are documented. What Chappelle and Williams describe: an industry with a submission requirement, a system that suppresses non-compliance, a distinction between those who have given something and those who have not, maps onto the 3-part disclosure framework established at the beginning of this video. Those inside the system know the rules. Those who won't follow them are removed. The disclosure of the rules is available to anyone who will listen to the people who experience them firsthand. The court records confirm the industry they describe. Harvey Weinstein was convicted. Victor Salva was convicted of child sexual abuse and served time. Roman Polanski pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual intercourse with a minor and fled the United States in 1978. He has not returned in nearly 50 years. Bryan Singer has faced multiple accusers and paid documented civil settlements. These are not theories, not symbols to decode. These are court records documenting that the industry described in these public testimonies is not imagination. It is an observed and experienced system confirmed by criminal conviction. The Economist, then and now. No single publication illustrates the Disclosure Doctrine in more documented, time-stamped, verifiable form than The Economist magazine. The Economist is 21% owned by the Rothschild family, one of the most powerful and documented banking dynasties in European history, with connections to the financial architecture of every major Western nation since the Napoleonic Wars. Its current editor-in-chief attended the 2025 Bilderberg meeting in Stockholm, an invitation-only conference held under Chatham House rule. Chatham House rule means that no attendee can publicly disclose what was discussed, creating a private space where the world's most powerful people can speak freely without accountability. She hears what the world is planning in private. She returns. She produces an annual cover. In 1988, The Economist published a cover showing a phoenix rising from a pile of burning national currencies. Around the phoenix's neck hung a gold coin dated 2018. The cover was published 30 years before Bitcoin entered mainstream consciousness, 30 years before central banks began racing to build digital currencies, 30 years before a supranational digital asset replacing national currencies became a subject of mainstream policy discussion. The phoenix is a specific and loaded symbol in this vocabulary. In ancient Egyptian myth and in the Hermetic tradition that drew from it, the phoenix is the bird that burns itself to death and rises reborn from its own ashes. It represents the deliberate destruction of the old order and the emergence of something entirely new from those ashes. The currency of the old nation-states burning beneath the rising phoenix, with a new global digital coin around its neck, dated exactly 30 years in the future, is the disclosure of a financial agenda that was already in motion in 1988. In 2015, The Economist published a cover containing a dense array of specific imagery that researchers analyzed for months. Alice in Wonderland falling down a rabbit hole. In a cult interpretive tradition, the rabbit hole represents the descent into hidden knowledge, into the world below the visible surface. A nuclear explosion, military drones, the faces of specific world leaders in specific arrangements. Whether the imagery is intentionally encoded or simply eclectic is the contested question. What is not contested is that it invited and continues to receive serious symbolic analysis. In November 2025, The Economist published its cover for The World Ahead 2026. Missiles, autonomous robots, surveillance drones, a 250th birthday cake, and a footballer standing outside the globe, outside the entire frame of the world, kicking it from the outside. We are 6 months into 2026. Here is what has been confirmed since the cover was published. Operation Epic Fury, the US and Israeli joint strikes on Iran, confirmed. The missiles happened. Arsenal 1, the autonomous weapons manufacturing facility producing tens of thousands of autonomous systems annually, went live in Columbus, Ohio in May 2026. The robots on the cover are operational. The 2026 FIFA World Cup opened on American soil on June 11, 2026. The footballer kicking the world from outside the frame was a specific prediction of a specific event that is happening right now. The editor-in-chief attended a private meeting under Chatham House rule, where the world's most powerful people discussed what was planned for 2026. She returned and produced a cover. The cover is confirming in real time. 6 months in, multiple specific confirmations, you were told. In November 2025, on a magazine cover available at every airport newsstand, in plain sight, the close. We have covered in this video only what is documented, verified, or clearly labeled as the interpretation of documented imagery and events. The Donald Barr novel exists and is in libraries today. He inserted Epstein into elite society the year after he published it. His son oversaw the federal custody in which Epstein died. The WF published, "You will own nothing and be happy" under their own branding. Schwab said, "We have penetrated the cabinets on film." He published The Great Reset 4 months into COVID. Event 201 simulated a coronavirus pandemic 6 weeks before COVID with the same organizations that governed the COVID response. Barack Obama reviewed the Leave the World Behind script and confirmed on record that the cyber attack collapse scenario was essentially accurate, off by only a few details. The film was produced by his own company. The Lone Gunman episode is time-stamped March 4, 2001. A remotely controlled aircraft targeting the World Trade Center. 6 months before September 11th, the Georgia Guidestones called in 8 languages for the elimination of 93% of humanity for 42 years in a field in Georgia. Someone destroyed them with explosives in 2022. No arrest has been made. The Denver airport murals depicting the destruction of the old world and the rise of the new utopian order are on public walls you can visit today. The Bohemian Grove cremation of care ritual was filmed by a journalist who walked in with a camera. The Washington, D.C. Masonic cornerstone ceremonies are in the congressional record. The all-seeing eye above the unfinished pyramid is in your wallet right now. The Paris 2024 Olympic ceremony placed a Dionysian figure, the god of the dissolution of moral and social constraint, at the center of a tableau visually identical to Christianity's most sacred image. The Pope personally responded. The Grammy 2023 performance broadcast the Luciferian light-bearer tradition, the philosophical system that celebrates liberation from divine moral constraint, to tens of millions of American households in prime time. The Recording Academy promoted it on their own channels. The Super Bowl halftime shows have broadcast the Masonic checkerboard, Egyptian goddess imagery, Hermetic elevation and descent narratives, Promethean fire symbolism, Revelation's scarlet-clothed sovereign power, consistently, repeatedly, across multiple years, multiple performers, and multiple artistic directors, to the largest television audience in American history every single year. Dave Chappelle walked away from $50 million and has described for 20 years what he experienced in the industry. Cat Williams gave a 40 million view interview subsequently validated by separate legal proceedings. Harvey Weinstein was convicted. Roman Polanski fled. Victor Salva served time and went back to directing. The pattern is real, the symbolism is documented, the language is consistent, and now you know what the language means. But here is where this series takes its most important turn. If the Disclosure Doctrine is genuine, if there is genuinely a system in which the agenda must be revealed before it is implemented, then spending your energy decoding halftime shows and magazine covers is looking at the shadow of the thing, not the thing itself. Michael Hoffman said the disclosure produces paralysis in those who see it but do not understand the deeper source. You see the pattern, you name the pattern, you tell someone about the pattern, they ridicule you, and you are processed, alchemically changed from a person who might have resisted into a person who watches and documents and does nothing. The enemy's disclosure system is designed to keep you in exactly that loop. The question is not which symbol to decode next. The question is where to find the most complete, the most precise, the most externally verified disclosure of everything we have been documenting across 2 videos. The disclosure that is not designed to paralyze you. The disclosure that is designed to set you free. And the answer is not a corporate logo. It is not an Olympic ceremony. It is not a novel about child sex trafficking published by an OSS officer running an elite school. It is not a coin dated 2018 on a magazine cover from 1988. It is not a collapse film reviewed by a former president who confirmed it was accurate. The most complete disclosure of the system being built right now, the surveillance architecture, the financial exclusion mechanism, the mark in the right hand or forehead, the covenant confirmed with many nations, the global leader who rises not by his own power, the counterfeit miracle, the eternal destruction of the beast, was written 3,000 years ago by prophets whose specific mathematical predictions have been confirmed by NASA, by historians, and by the archived records of empires that no longer exist. God declared the end from the beginning. Before the first empire rose, before the first corporate logo was designed, before the first halftime show was broadcast, before the first Olympic ceremony was choreographed. He told you what was coming, in precise, mathematical, astronomically confirmed detail. The enemy did not invent disclosure. He counterfeited it. He took the principle God established. Declare the end from the beginning, warn before you act, show what is coming before it arrives. And he corrupted it. He turned the warning into a weapon. He made it visible enough to see and complex enough to get lost in. He gave you the shadow to chase so you would never look at the light. In part 3, we show you exactly what the original disclosure says, how its track record of accuracy compares to everything we have covered in parts 1 and 2. What it says has already happened. What it says is happening right now, and what it says is coming next. Thank you for watching. If this video gave you something worth thinking about, please like it, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to this channel so you do not miss part 3. We are watching in real time. And right now, what we are watching is producing answers faster than we can write them down.